The United States, indeed, much of the rest of the world, is still in the grips of one of the most significant economic collapses since the Great Depression of the 1930s. What's the cause of this? Economists have tended to focus on such things as bad debt, mortgage housing crisis, bad investment by banks, unusual forms of investment called derivatives, all of which have made a contribution. But sociologists tend to look for deeper underlying structural causes. And I would say the primary cause that sociologists have identified have to do with the changing nature of the economy in the world today. This is sometimes called globalization. But the question is, are we in the midst of a major transformation, which even when the current economic crisis is addressed, will continue to eat away at jobs and change the way we live? There have been historically two major revolutions that sociologists have looked at, which have changed the way human beings live. The first was the agricultural revolution, typically dated to maybe 12,000 years ago, in which people began to grow crops in settled agriculture, which enabled them to put away a surplus for the future, and that led to the growth of cities, to social classes, and many major changes in the form of society. The second change was the Industrial Revolution, 200 to 300 years ago, beginning especially in England. And this led to the harnessing of non-human energy, non-animal energy, in fact, mechanical energy, and led to modern factory production, and made possible the world that we know. But the third revolution is a combination of two things: the information revolution, the microchip, marketed in 1971, and what followed that, globalization, the ability to move products around the world at lightning speed. 11 days by container ship from Asia to the west coast of the US, and instantly, with the click of a mouse, as far as information, money, and things of that sort. This third revolution we are in the midst of, so we don't really understand how it's going to play out. But we know it has had some serious effects. Just to name a few of them. One, the loss of jobs from once wealthy countries to poor countries. This has been very good for the parts of the world that need those jobs. So the movement of jobs from the US to China, for example, which has been a major part of the hollowing out of the US economy, has been beneficial for many Chinese, although it's created hardship for those who work under terrible conditions. But it has created a Chinese middle class. The flip side of that, of course, is long-term growing unemployment in the US and growing poverty in the US. And one final effect that I'll mention is the hollowing out of government. Governments depend on having an economy which is more or less contained within their borders, if governments are able to tax and spend wisely. But when businesses are truly global and know no national boundaries, it is hard for governments to use the levers that have been developed for governments to manage their national economies. And so we see growing national debt and the whole host of problems that plague the United States and Europe today. In fact, what is interesting is that the parts of the world that are growing today are the parts that seem to be left behind only 10 or 15 years ago. China, Brazil, many countries in the developing economy. What does this mean for students today? It means that students are being socialized, the sociologists have put it, for an unknown future, one in which you may change careers 3 or 4 times. It means that students today will be competing with their counterparts around the world today because everybody is hungry. And China, for example, today is turning out more PhDs in science and engineering than the United States is. So it will not necessarily be an easy transition. But if you keep your eye on the prize, if you work hard, and if you know what you want to do, you can secure a future for yourself.